Call Clegg. Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg takes your calls with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. 0845 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC 973. This is Call Clegg on London's biggest conversation. LBC 97.3.
It's 9 o'clock on Thursday, the 9th of January, and this is Nick Clegg bringing you your very first edition of Call Clegg in 2014. If you're new to the show, just let me remind you how it works. I just take your questions for the next half an hour on anything you want. I'll do my best to answer you. So if you want to get involved, call on 0845 6060 973 or email at nickclegg@lbc.co.uk. You can watch, of course, on the website, lbc.co.uk. But before, Mr. Ferrari, before I come to the first caller, do you know what day this is?
Oh, God, it's the 8th of January, isn't it?
I can't believe you've forgotten.
Hold on, what have I done?
I can't believe you've forgotten.
Oh, it was your birthday 2 days ago.
It is our anniversary.
Oh, my God.
I can't believe you've forgotten. I'm feeling spurned. This is terrible. And I've actually gone out and bought you, look, a little... Well, you know, the listeners can't hear it. Look, a box of Cadbury milk tray.
Oh, look at that.
To commemorate the first anniversary of Call Clegg.
Oh, well, listen...
This is our 41st show.
Is it really? Do you not think that perhaps I've eaten enough chocolates in my life?
I think you possibly have, and that's why I think you're well equipped to eat some more.
I will share them with the team, and can I say it's been fantastic. Where's my...
gift?
So most importantly, I was going to make the important point that what I know is that the listeners enjoy it, and they enjoy your candour. So I've had a great year, and a happy new year to you and your family.
Great, but I bet your listeners will be interested to know that you haven't given me a gift. Anyway, moving on.
Thought.
All right, well, I might hold that thought.
Prime Minister, and thank you for these.
All right.
Okay.
I wait with bated breath. Adam in Cobham. Thanks for waiting, Adam.
Yes, hi, good morning, and happy anniversary to you both.
Thank you.
He's been seeing other men, and it's Ed Balls, and we'll talk about that in a minute. On you go, Nick Clegg.
Right, okay. My question is regarding migration from Europe into this country. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, lots of pros. I know that you're obviously quite in favour, and there's other groups that are not necessarily in favour of this. But what is so fundamentally important and is often overlooked is the fact that this seems to be largely anti-democratic in terms of how it's been dealt with. Considering how large the change to the culture in this country, the shape, the size, the face, and even the economics, surely the people of this country, whether they were landed or whether they were born here, should have had a referendum on whether they wanted the type of open border policy that's seen such an increase. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. Surely the majority needed to have their say on this.
Sure. Well, look,
and that hasn't happened. Don't you think that is anti-democratic?
Well, actually, I wouldn't quite put it in the way that you have, Adam, but I think where you and I would agree is that not talking about this is a very bad thing, and I think many people now acknowledge that for far too long there was a kind of real sense that people were feeling anxious about levels of immigration, and yet the kind of media and the political classes, not all of them, just weren't really engaging with it. I think now we're having a great big socking debate about this day in, day out, and that is politically and democratically, which is your point, democratically a very healthy thing. This is going to be front and centre, for instance, in the elections taking place later this year. But can I just say one thing, Adam? When we joined the European, as it was then, European community back in the early 70s, I don't think it was hidden from anybody that one of the principles of having the world's largest borderless single market was not only that people could come to look for work here, but crucially that Brits could live and work elsewhere in the European Union as well. And I think some estimates suggest that 2 million Brits live and work elsewhere in the European Union. So it is a two-way street, and I think most people understood that at the time.
Adam?
No, I don't deny that element of it. My real concern is that you would have had to have been born in the 50s.
Right.
For you to have been able to have the chance to say on this. My concern, Mr. Clegg, not about me. I'm 34 now. The die is pretty much cast for me. I'm concerned about my son going forward. What type of society he will inherit, and what I've allowed him to inherit. He's 6 years old,
right? Yeah.
And that's my principal concern. And so it's all very well and good you saying that was the case at the time. But my father, who was in the right age to vote, never voted for what we've seen.
Yeah.
And I have to say that you cannot marginalise people under the age of 63 who didn't get the chance to vote on this. A referendum, a debate is fine. We've had debate. Let's feed the argument. Let's have both sides. That's good. That's democracy. But let's have a referendum, please, on this.
Right. Well, and just a couple of things. I mean, firstly, what I do, of course, entirely accept is that something very, very significant happened some years ago, as you know. The previous Labour administration, basically, and I think they've now acknowledged this was a mistake. They basically said that countries in Central and Eastern Europe who joined the European Union could come to the United Kingdom. I think there were only two other countries that lifted those restrictions at the time, Sweden and Ireland, whereas the other big economies, Germany, Italy, France, didn't. And what, of course, happened was they said, oh, don't worry, not very many people are going to come here. And far, far more people came than they'd predicted. I think that had that dealt a body blow to public trust and confidence in the way in which the immigration system works. So what we've been trying to do recently is firstly avoid those past mistakes. So we're lifting these last restrictions on those eligible to come here from Bulgaria and Romania in keeping with other countries. But crucially, we're breaking the link, and this is really important, Adam, if I can just sort of highlight this. We're breaking the link between the right to move to look for work and the right to claim benefits, no questions asked, no strings attached, for as long as you like. And we're the first government to do that, because I think that is immensely important, that people know that protecting the freedom, by the way, for Brits just as much as anyone else, to move to other European countries to look for work is not an unqualified right, and it is certainly not an unqualified right to receive benefits. And I think as long as we are clear about that distinction, I hope over time that will help.
And yet, lastly, Deputy Prime Minister, how do you reflect on the survey this week? More than 3/4 of British people want to see a cut in immigration, and the study of social attitudes also says that there's a number of people who actually want to see the concerns regarding Romanians and Bulgarians mean further restrictions.
Well, look, does it surprise me that if you ask, if you're a sort of someone who goes around canvassing public opinion, are you worried about immigration? Does it surprise me that a lot of people say yes? No, of course it doesn't. I spend a lot of time crisscrossing the country. I'm going to Leeds today.
77%.
No, I know, it's a huge, yeah. But do I think that the answer to that, and, I'm a practical politician, you have public concern, and then you have, what do you do about it? Do I think the answer to that is simply pulling up the drawbridge? No, I do not. Emphatically not. We are an open economy. Lots and lots of Brits travel and work and live elsewhere, up to 2 million elsewhere in the European Union. What would we do if we suddenly chucked out every German accountant, every Finnish banker, every Dutch engineer? What would happen to the people who retired on the cost of...
So is the Prime Minister right to try and bring in... He's talking about a restricted number, isn't he?
No, as far as I understand it, the Home or someone in the Home Office has leaked this idea of somehow, putting some numerical cap from elsewhere in the European Union, which of course would then mean that there'd be a cap put on the number of Brits who can go elsewhere in Europe, and you get a tit for tat. And before you know it, lots of Brits at the moment who either live or retire or work abroad in the European Union are not able to do so.
The Prime Minister is minded to support that.
No. This has emerged in the newspapers as a proposal floating around in the Home Office. It is not a formal government proposal, and it's not one that, if I understand it correctly, the Conservatives even are supporting formally themselves. What we are focusing on, and this is, by the way, where in the coalition there is complete unity between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, is to tighten up, as I said earlier to Adam, the rules about when you have access to benefits when you come to this country from other European Union countries. And on that, I'm as forceful as anybody else in saying, if you come here to look for work, fine, you got that right, just as we got the right to do that in your country, but you don't have necessarily the right just to simply claim benefits, no question. And by the way, on that point, since it's been talked about in the press a bit over the last day or two, I like the Prime Minister, and I suspect, like a lot of people in this country, don't quite understand why on earth it is possible at the moment, under our current rules, to pay someone child benefit for children who aren't even in this country. That does seem to me to be perverse. We're not directing.
Haven't you done something about it?
Well, because that is one of those things that you do need to discuss with other European countries so that you get Europe-wide agreement. That takes a bit of time. There are some things we can do immediately, which we have implemented right now. A waiting time.
So you want to stop that as well? These payments to children overseas.
I think as this debate develops, more and more countries, not just ourselves, across the European Union, will say.
Is it?
No, it's very liberal to say. Yeah, of course it is to say to people who haven't, over a long period of time, contributed through their taxes in the past to the way in which our welfare system works. To say there are certain restrictions to what you can access and when. Yes, come here. If If you want to play by the rules, pay your taxes and look for work. That's great, just as Brits do elsewhere, but it is not a free-for-all when it comes to benefits.
All right, let's take other calls if we can.
Jason in Docklands. Hello, Jason.
Hello, mate. How you doing?
How are you, right?
Good. Yeah, good. I just want to know why we keep on cutting our key services.
Oh, what?
Like welfare,
Key services.
police, NHS. Media keeps on showing that there's sort of benefits people are sort of made out to be like they're sort of frauding the benefit system. Well, really, it's a tiny percentage.
Yeah.
Is this as a result, Jason? It's Nick Ferrari here. This is a result of that television show Benefit Street. Is that what you're thinking?
Part of that. Plus,
part,
yeah.
Okay.
What it is
Okay.
we keep on hearing the same thing every time. They're cutting the police force, the fire brigade have got to be cut, and we just don't hear cuts of anywhere else.
OK, I mean, this comes, of course, as we should say that there are fire stations literally being closed in London today. And the documentary on Channel 4 earlier this week, Benefit Street. This is a street in Birmingham. It's called James Turner Street. The TV station called it Benefit Street. Some 75% of the 99 households there are living on some form of benefits, in some instances up to £900 a month.
Look, Jason, firstly, why we're having to make savings at all? I know you probably think that I sound like a stuck record on this, but it's worth repeating. It's because we had this massive heart attack in our economy back in 2008. The last government took its eye sort of catastrophically off the ball as far as the banks were concerned. They spent money they didn't have. You know, we can't as the economy got smaller, we can't carry on spending money as if nothing had happened. So you have to somehow balance the books. Otherwise, our kids and our grandkids simply pick up the tab for us, which is not fair at all. So that's the reason why. Then, and this is the point I think you're driving at, Jason, quite rightly, there's a choice. There's a choice about how you fill the black hole. Do you increase taxes? When you make spending reductions, where do the reductions fall? Now, the choices we've taken, and I'm totally understand that you and others might have disagreements on this, but the choices we took as a government were that we're not going to cut the money for the NHS, so we kind of ring-fence, as they call it in the jargon, money for the NHS. We're not going to cut money for schools, so we basically protected the funding for schools. We're not going to make pensioners pay the penalty for the mistakes of the bankers and the last government. So we protected pensions. In fact, we delivered them a triple lock guarantee. We're going to honour our international obligations to provide 0.7% of our national wealth to the poorest countries around the world. And that, of course, meant, yes, you're quite right, that services like the police and other services then do have to make savings. And I accept those are choices, but to protect children in schools, to protect patients in the NHS, to protect the vulnerable and the elderly in our pension system, to make sure that we honour our obligations to the poorest around the world, seemed to me to be a reasonable set of priorities which we're protecting from savings. And that, of course, meant that savings had to come elsewhere. Now the debate, Jason, just simply since you touched on it, is what do you do in the future? And that's where, interestingly, this week, a sort of quite a big debate has opened up between the two coalition parties, because the Conservatives are basically saying we're only going to ask the working age poor to make further sacrifices when we have to make further spending reductions. We're not going to ask the super rich to pay extra taxes and so on. I think they're completely wrong. Because I think it's just downright unfair to, when you've got multi-millionaire bankers living in great big, mansions, and the Conservatives are not even prepared to ask them to pay.
Osborne
yes, I have.
What does he say back to you?
Well, they've got to make up that. You invite him on his show; he can explain it for himself. But for some reason, they think
he's not as friendly as you.
Well, he's a perfectly friendly bloke. I'm sure he'll open up to you, Nick. And give him a box of chocolates, such as I've given you,
I shall try.
Even though unreciprocated. I note.
Hold that thought.
Okay, you keep saying that, but we'll see. But Jason, the point I'm making is that now going forward, because what George Osborne, for instance, was talking about on Monday, quite rightly, is that the job is not yet finished. We've still got several years of savings to finish the job of filling this black hole, the so-called, what the economists call the structural deficit. He's saying he's only going to ask the working age poor to make additional sacrifices. I'm saying, no, you've got to do it in a balanced and fair way. So yes, we'll have to make further welfare savings, for instance. Yes, we'll have to make further savings on Whitehall spending, but we'll also need to ask particularly people with the broadest shoulders, to make a small additional contribution through fairer taxes. All right,
quick email question. Thank you for that, Jason. Former prisoner Vicky Price has said she's not ruled out standing as an MP, says Graham in Bushy. If she wished to stand as a Lib Dem, would you welcome her as a candidate?
Thankfully, it is not for me to decide. It would be for the local party where she applies to decide whether they want to have her as a.
Why are you chuckling, Deputy Prime Minister?
I'm not chuckling because if it was a sort of beauty contest where the leader decided whether I like this candidate or that candidate, I think I'd be asked about absolutely everybody. As it happens, I've known Vicky Pryce for many years, and of course I've known Chris for many years. I think it's
Chris Huhne.
Yes, Chris Huhne. I think it's of course terrifically sad what happened to them, but she is a highly intelligent woman. He's happens to be a highly intelligent man. They're both extremely gifted.
So she'd be an asset to the party.
They're both extremely gifted individuals who, whatever they've done wrong in the past, I do actually believe in allowing people to move on. They've done their time. They'll have to always explain themselves for what went wrong, but that is not in any way to deny, for instance, my friendship with Chris, which I've never denied, despite a lot of pressure. I still count him as a friend, and I certainly remain full of admiration for the talents of both of them. She, for instance, is a highly accomplished economist.
So she'd be an asset to the party as an MP.
I hope to see her continue to make a contribution to the public life, particularly in the areas where she's a real expert, which is on the economy.
OK, more calls.
Ty in Sidcup.
Hello, hi, good morning, Nick Clegg. I'm a bit nervous.
Oh, no, don't be.
Just a personal matter. I would like to know how you're going to tackle racist bullying in schools, because my son, he's in year 8 now, but last year he faced racist bullying and he was called the P word. Me being a British Pakistani, my kids born and brought up here. I work, I pay my taxes, I do everything. And it was a very, very, very hard time for him. He was very emotional, very upset.
I bet.
The young chap was suspended from school.
But he was suspended?
He was suspended, but the deep-rooted problem wasn't really looked at. And what happened was that he came back to school. My son, he sent him an email, and he said that we're not all all in the same boat. We're not all the same, and the young chap did understand that, but I think my son had to educate him more, and in regards to how we are as as Pakistanis and how we live in regards to what is going on in the outer world.
And just to give listeners some context, Deputy Prime Minister, this comes as Childline says it's seen the largest increase in the number of children contacting it with concerns about bullying, up some 69%, it reported this week. That's
in schools?
Yes, that's children, yeah.
Oh, yes, you mean people coming forward to, yes.
To Childline.
It's a growing problem, sorry to hear that. I mean, any mum or dad listening to you, a child being bullied at school, I just think is one of, any parent's worst nightmares. Can I just ask a couple of questions? How did you find the response from the school governors, and teachers?
I did talk to his teacher in school, and she did handle it quite well. And she did say that we do take matters of racism really seriously. But the young boy was only suspended. Personally, I think that the teachers need to be educated slightly more in regards to race and and other races and other religions. So it was just the problem was just you skimmed from the top, so they didn't really look into the deep-rooted problems of what was going on. And it's not as if it's my son in secondary school who's faced this. My younger son, who goes to primary school, when the incident happened in Woolwich, he was looked upon in a slightly different manner to say the other more white. Or,
okay. Let's get Mr. Clegg's reaction.
Ty, firstly, I'm glad to hear that. I think you're saying that on the whole the school and the teacher responded well. That's very encouraging. I mean, bluntly, some years ago, schools were just, bullying, homophobic bullying, race bullying, just wasn't really being taken seriously enough by schools. I think it is now taken seriously by the vast majority of schools. I can certainly speak on behalf of the government. We take it extremely seriously. There is just simply no room for complacency whatsoever. This can be such a traumatic experience for children. It can really mark them for life, and that they have to see that they're being taken seriously, compassionately, that those who commit that kind of ignorant, prejudiced bullying are not only punished where that's necessary, but also, as you say, that it goes a bit deeper than that, and that they understand quite why quite wide is as wrong as it is, and quite wide is as offensive as it is, and that does require teachers, yes, but teachers with parents. My own view is that often these issues, teachers can do so much, but unless parents work hand in glove with teachers at difficult occasions like this, it's quite difficult to really get to the root of the problem.
All right, thank you for that. Good luck, Ty. Do stay in touch. Let us know if there are any other issues from that very important problem of racist bullying to a little bit of name-calling that's gone on, Deputy Prime Minister. It started off quite light-hearted. I think you referred to him as Slacker Johnson. Then it started to get a little bit angry between the two of you. I don't know whether you heard the London Mayor earlier this week.
He's there to fulfil a very important ceremonial function as David Cameron's kind of lapdog come prophylactic protection device for all the difficult things that David Cameron has to do.
That was Boris Johnson giving me his description of you, Mr.
And this
Clegg.
was on my birthday. I've had nicer birthday wishes than that, I can tell you. Look, do you know what I think? I think I'm, for once, with Ed Balls on this. I think name-calling is all very passé. It's all very 2013. So
You're moving on.
I'm going to say to Boris, come on, Boris, join Ed Balls and myself, and let's have a truce. I do think, without sounding too pious about it, we've all got quite important jobs to get on with, and I think most Londoners listening to this would probably expect Boris Johnson to kind of focus on the day job of sorting out our transport system, our housing crisis in London, rather than ever more exotic ways of describing his political opponents.
You call it a truce with Mr. Balls. The Sun newspaper calls it a love-in. You're joining forces to attack the Conservatives. You're paving the way for a Lib-Lab coalition after the next general election. Mr. Clegg.
It's completely ridiculous. Listen, Ed Balls confessed to the fact that he and I had a passing friendly conversation in the House of Commons. If this is now being interpreted as some great act of political significance, then we're reaching new heights of hype. Look,
I have no reason to say anything nasty about him, says Ed Balls of Nick Clegg.
Look, I mean, my attitude towards Ed Balls, by the way, is that attitude towards, I think, in fact, you and I talked about it some time ago. I try, I'm sure I fail. I'm not always consistent, but I try where I can to always in politics be civil and polite, but be tough and not personalise stuff, be very trenchant where I disagree with people on policy. Of course, I fervently disagree with Ed Balls about the role that he and the Labour government played in creating the economic crisis in the first place. Just in the same way he fervently disagrees with some of the choices I've made in government. But it doesn't mean you can't treat someone like a human being. And look, I think he and I are both probably thick-skinned enough now. Okay. I certainly am to kind of be friendly on a human level, but nonetheless kind of in a tough but respectful way maintain your political differences.
Let's move on to other calls.
Duke in Oxford. It's not the Duke of Oxford, I suppose. Duke in Oxford.
Yes, it is. Here I am. Yeah. Good morning, Mr. Clegg.
You are the Duke of Oxford. No, you're not. No.
A Duke.
A Duke. Sorry. Hello, Duke.
How are you?
Very well. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. My question to you this morning is, in light of the findings in the Duggan case, are the government going to consider removing all police from the complaints procedure, as at the moment complaints against the service can end up in front of an inspector who will usually find that the officer has done nothing wrong. Now, in the case of one of the officers in the Duggan case actually released information saying that there had been a gunfight between the police, which we know was a falsehood. And so it cascaded and it smudged the whole scenario.
It should just be said it was the IPCC that actually released that information. Don't go, Duke. Let's get to Mr. Clegg.
Look, Duke, I think this case of the shooting of Mark Duggan and, of course, the result of the jury, the inquest jury yesterday, I can totally understand, and I think the Commissioner has been quite right to say this morning that he also understands why that's caused as much anxiety, concern, in some cases outright anger amongst members of family, friends, the community. I remember going to the community in Tottenham a few days after those events and speaking actually to many of the people we're now seeing on our television screens, some of the local religious leaders, the local police commanders and so on. By the way, I remain full of admiration for the work that they do to try and keep people's very, very strongly held feelings and disagreements on this peaceful. I think it's very important that the aunt has come out today saying that they're going to pursue their case through the courts. It shouldn't be out on the streets. The point I would say to you, I'm sure there are questions that need to be asked, not only about how some of these investigations are conducted. I, for instance, was very struck when I went there that some of the local local folk I met said, look, part of the problem is that when an IPCC investigation happens, there's a whole lot of stuff that can't be said. Communication breaks down, in a sense, about the details of the case because it's under investigation exactly at the moment when people need to talk to each other. And that, of course, is a real dilemma because you have to allow the IPCC the space to investigate. But on the other hand, if that means that people aren't able to talk about often a different interpretation of facts, that can cause space for even greater misunderstanding. But the crucial point...
Can police investigate police is what Duke's driving.
Well, look, but at the end of the day, in this case, let's remember, this is a jury. This is a jury, just like a court jury. This is a jury of people just, randomly selected, just like anybody else who's been called up for jury service. It's not people. It's not the police acting as judge and jury.
But in other cases that don't necessarily get to a 4-month inquest, as we've seen in this instance, broadly speaking, can police sit in judgment of police?
Well, as I say, the whole way in which the IPCC has evolved is in order to make sure that that is done independently of the police, and in fact, there's a lot of. Sometimes you'll hear quite a lot of people being critical that say that the IPCC is taking too long, or is not giving either police or the community enough access to their thinking as the investigations are going on. This is really, really difficult. This is a very, very difficult time. It's a time of great anxiety in Tottenham. I think the Commissioner is right to say that he's going to go out and meet members of the community. I think he's right to look at things like, for instance, having this pilot where armed police will have cameras so that in future, where you have these disputed incidents, that you've got more material to be able to make reasoned judgments. We're going to all have to work really hard that at moments of tension like this, people feel that their voices are heard and that disagreements play out peacefully.
Let's do an email. Raquel in Hastings. The Prime Minister spends £90 on having his hair cut. How much do you spend?
Well, hang on. The last time I got my hair cut was in Sheffield, in my constituency, where haircuts are considerably cheaper than in London.
How much did you spend?
And Christian in Jam on where is it? Oakbrook Road, yeah, just down the road from my constituency office. He charged me £20.
Yes,
but I do pay more when I get my haircut in London, just in a hairdresser just off Victoria Street. But
how much does that cost you, Mr. Clegg?
I can't remember, but it's considerably more. It's a good, or it might be well double what it is in Sheffield.
About 40,
I think, but I need to double check. But
you see the Deputy Prime Minister certainly more than any of us do.
I am the Deputy Prime Minister. I do see myself.
I've promoted
you. Thank you, Nick.
You see the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, more than the rest of us. Is it worth £90?
Oh, for heaven's sake, you're not going to ask me to provide commentary on.
What does it look like a £90 haircut?
I think all these attacks on this poor head. I mean, it's
Lino Carbassiero.
It's typical attacks on someone who's successfully delivering cuts. There's my pun of the day.
Is he going bald?
I'm simply not going to get into this. I think I don't spend a lot of time either thinking or talking about other people's haircuts.
All right. Lastly, did his hairdresser deserve an MBE?
I think, to be fair, he got the MBE for completely different, sort of wider reasons. It wasn't a decision by the Prime Minister. It had nothing to do with it.
All right. Let's go to other calls.
Paul in Islington.
Hello, Nick.
Hello, Paul.
Nick. Hi there. I just wanted to ask your opinion on the fact that we're closing 10 fire stations today, and how can Boris Johnson claim we're making a safer London when he's taking the safety factor out of it, in a time where we got terrorist attacks and stuff. And he seems to be kind of, I don't know if he's become psychic and lost his marbles.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the Deputy Prime Minister, you're aware that he's spoken with the Fire Commissioner, Ron Dobson, a number of occasions, and there is an absolute implicit guarantee that we will all be safe in our homes, Deputy Prime Minister.
Paul, I'm sorry, there's really not very much I can add to what the Mayor himself has said. And, he's the guy in the hot seat on this. It's his responsibility. He's said to Londoners that he thinks there is no risk to safety through this restructuring, the closure of some of these fire stations. And I've got no reason to dispute that. That's what the guy who's responsible for these decisions is saying.
We have a final call, Deputy Prime Minister.
Barry in Hampstead. Hello, Barry.
Hi, sir. My question is, press is talk about too much homework for children.
It's a bad line. Is it the homework story you're talking about? Too much home? Was it the Jamie Oliver story? we've lost you. I'm going to sense that it is.
What's that?
Jamie Oliver says is supporting this idea that too many children have too much homework, and indeed he has said that he actively encourages his 11-year-old daughter to not always necessarily finish her homework. How important is homework, Deputy Prime Minister?
I think homework is important. And look, I've got 3 little children.
Do you ensure they do theirs?
Oh yeah, no, I do, and two of them. Two of them, are sort of deep in kind of homework territory, and in the evenings when I can, and in the weekends, I like any interested parent, I take a great deal of interest in their homework. And sometimes they do have a lot, and sometimes I do think back and like, wow, they've got a lot. I can't remember having quite as much as they did, but on the whole, I think it doesn't always actually help your son or daughter if your son or daughter goes into school and they're behind, and then they're being asked questions by their teachers about why they haven't done their homework, and then they've got to catch up. That, in many ways, seems to me, in the long run, probably to create more friction and stress than just trying to help them keep on top of it.
We've celebrated a year together, Mr. Clegg. I've asked you a lot of personal questions. You've always been very, very good-natured. You've never, ever bitten back or snapped at me, but this might be getting a bit close. When did you last buy underwear from Marks and Spencer's? Because they have again posted poor trading figures, as you may be aware. 10th quarter in a row.
I better go out and buy some...
Where do you get your undergarments?
I'm not going to get... Look,
is that too much?
The same way as other politicians' haircuts. I'm just not going to start talking about the...
But you still shop at Marks?
I'm a big fan of Marks, but their food stuff recently, I think it's done rather well, isn't it? It's their clothing. It's the clothing which is not doing quite so well. Clothing's very, very competitive these days in the high street.
Now, you said I'd forgotten our anniversary.
Yes.
And I asked you to hold that thought. Can we now... We've actually had a special cake, and I must thank the cake store based in Sydenham. We've got a knife, and I'm going to ask you... And what we
I should do it near the microphone, otherwise...
You may recall the very first time you appeared, the final question was, do you own a onesie? To which you replied that yes, you did. So the cake, just so that everybody... And we'll put a picture on the website. This is to celebrate our first... You're going to wish we never started this, aren't you, Mr. Clegg?
Yep.
There you are, in your onesie. And I wonder if I could ask you to cut the cake.
So, this is typical. I give you a box of milk tray.
Yeah.
Bought with great generosity from a petrol station somewhere.
Yeah.
And you instead give me a cake, making me look like a complete lemon.
The cake store based in Sydenham.
Well, can I thank the cake store from Sydenham? They must have had a real laugh doing this one. Well, I look completely ridiculous, so I'm going to... Make sure I'm not going to cut myself in a painful place.
More cuts from the Deputy Prime Minister. Right. This is to celebrate our onesie anniversary.
Our onesie anniversary, yes. Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed it hugely.
There you go. Just getting... I know I'm off mic, but here we are. We celebrate this. Thank you
very
much
indeed.
Very large.
Well done. Very large.
You're
slice.
listening to LBC 97.3. Call Clegg. I can't eat that much. I've got your chocolates to eat as well. Where news is next. Thanks, Mr. Clegg.
Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg's telling LBC 97.3 questions still need to be answered over the shooting of Mark Duggan in Tottenham.
About how some of these investigations are conducted. I, for instance, was very struck when I went there that some of the local folk I met said, look, part of the problem is that when an IPCC investigation happens, there's a whole lot of stuff that can't be said.